All right, surprise, surprise. We're actually going to start at 34. Um, so we're doing something a little different today. I am not your normal lecturer, but you might already know me. I'm Han, and we're going to be learning about SwiftUI today. So today's lecture and Monday's lecture are both going to be given by me on SwiftUI. Today we're just going to talk about the first part of the basics, which is just composing views using SwiftUI. So we're going to talk about, what is SwiftUI? What is this brand new name that sounds very similar to what you've been used to? We're going to talk about why SwiftUI. So I'm going to try to motivate you to, at least give it a shot, try building something with SwiftUI and seeing why it's better than UIKit. And then we're also going to learn how to create views and put different things on the screen and how to combine them together. So you know that all your screens are just a composition of multiple components. How are we going to lay them out and make them look good together? Another one is reusing views. So this is kind of a crash course for your table views / collection views lectures. I'm going to teach it in 30 seconds. And then we're going to talk about navigation, moving from one screen to another. Also, pretty easy, 30-second slide. And then I'm going to give a demo at the end to show you how exactly we're going to build and write an app in SwiftUI. So first of all, what is SwiftUI? You already know UIKit. That's what we've been kind of teaching you all semester in this class. So UIKit is a framework developed by Apple to build a UI. SwiftUI is another framework. It's a built-in library developed by Apple that gives you a more usable set of view classes. You will see in a second just how more usable they are. And also an alternative syntax for like constructing screens in an alternative life cycle. So there's less like overhead for creating a new screen because the life cycle is simply shorter. And this framework was developed to eventually replace UIKit with the goal of kind of building reactive apps for iOS. And it was inspired by React. So if you guys have done any web development in the past, you might see some parallels between SwiftUI and like React or Flutter or something like that. So why SwiftUI? The main thing is that you're going to be writing many fewer lines of code, so you're going to develop apps a lot more quickly. Another feature is, or two features I guess, are the canvas and live preview, which allow you to kind of update a piece of code, and you don't have to actually recompile the entire code base in order to see what changes are reflected on your screen. I'm not going to be covering this today, but because it doesn't actually work on my computer, but these are kind of beginner-friendly UI-oriented development features that help people kind of build UIs without knowing how to code very well yet. Another thing is that SwiftUI is both forwards and backwards compatible. So you can use UIKit features that are not yet in SwiftUI by creating a wrapper around it. And then you can also use SwiftUI views in an existing UIKit code base. So if you kind of join a new company, join a new team, and they already have a bunch of UIKit code, and you want to kind of migrate towards SwiftUI, you can do that without rewriting the old stuff. And then also this framework is fully supported by Apple, and they're attempting to future-proof it as much as they can. So yeah, definitely give it a shot. Our goals for today are to kind of understand the structs and modifiers that go along with constructing views, and to kind of identify how to lay out things under the new paradigm. And we're going to end up building a simple UI using SwiftUI. This is what it's going to look like. I kind of mocked up a ripoff of Genius, the lyrics app, to kind of work on today. This is going to be what we build in the demo. Any questions so far about SwiftUI, what it is? Cool. All right, so creating views. How do we put things on the screen? This is the first bit of code I'm going to show you. In 6 lines, we already have something showing up on the screen. Right? As you can see, first thing we have to do is import the framework, so import SwiftUI. And then you see the struct content view has a type view. Right? So this is just going to be something that you require to put in your file if you want a screen to show up. This is also populated by default when you create a new project. The body variable is essentially a formula to build the UI. And so everything within body is going to be rendered into your screen. And then you can put a literal like text object initialize it with whatever string you want it to show, and then it'll show up on the screen, as you can see here. So of course, this can get a little more complicated, and we're going to get into that in a second. But let's say I want to change what the text looks like. Then I can modify the text object, but instead of saying like, text view, or binding it to a variable called text view and then saying like text view.color equals red, or text view.size is bigger than whatever it was before, I just say text.foreground color red .font title, right? That's the title is the style of the font. And so you don't actually have to write text over and over again, and you don't have to bind it to a certain variable. And this makes it very easy to put everything in one place that corresponds with one thing on your view. And so as you can see, I changed the color of the text to red, and I made it a little bigger by setting it to the title setting of the font. So there's different types of view objects. Obviously, there's more than just text. You can have images as well. And Swift, Xcode, and like iOS apps have default images that you can use. So this is the bookmark.fill icon that you can use by default. So the modifiers that I've applied to this image are resizable, which makes it so that I can change the size of the image. I applied a frame to it, which changes the size of the image that I just allowed myself to do. And then the foreground color, which I changed to red. And so that just changes the icon color to red. Any questions about these two views and the modifiers? Cool. Of course, views can be initialized in different ways, right? So this image right here is actually not a default image. I imported a Daft Punk album cover into the assets, and then I called the name. So the image name is actually randomaccessmemories.png, and so I just call the name of the PNG in the image constructor, and then I can add additional modifiers to it. So we have resizable, same as before, frame, same as before, but this time I added a clip, which allows me to kind of cut away other parts of the image according to a circular mask. And then I can also add a drop shadow, which is just like a yellow shadow with a radius of 8 pixels. In UIKit, you would probably have to write a bunch of lines for this, saying like image.layer.shadow radius equals 8, and then next line image.radius or image.layer.shadow like shadow color is yellow, something like that. But this just makes it really easy because it's all in one place. Another great thing about SwiftUI is that you can compose views within other views. So this button view, for example, takes in a label, and a label just describes exactly what the button looks like, right? The button by default has the ability to turn dark when you tap on it and then go back to normal when you release your finger. And you can also make it do something, right? So this button actually takes in 2 arguments. First is a completion that I've populated here with print button pressed. And this is just like a set of actions to do when the button is pressed. And the second parameter is the label, and that describes what it looks like. And I made it look like a rectangle. I made it rectangle, or a red rectangle, and I set its size using frame and corner radius and shadow. So I can include this rectangle in the button, or rather you can think of it as like the button contains a rectangle. Any questions so far? Cool. So now that you know that you can put one view inside of another, let's talk about combining views. So there's certain views that can combine multiple views within it. One of the first ones you're going to learn about is VStack, which stands for vertical stack, and it literally stacks things in a vertical way, right? So here I stacked an image above a piece of text. There's also a way to organize this, because in your body variable right here, if you have a bunch of like layers of VStacks and HStacks, which I'll get to in a second, and just like a shit ton of views all in one place, it's going to get really messy. It's going to be a really long variable declaration. So you can separate it out actually by binding these variables to, or binding these views to variables, right? And because you don't really want to access these view variables from outside of your view, you can mark them as private. And then another thing to note is that the type of these is annotated as some view. that just means that it is some view, right? You don't need to declare that it's an image view. You don't need to declare that it's a text view, right? You just say it's some kind of view, and then SwiftUI will infer the rest. And then in the body, I just simply bind these two into the VStack, or I just refer to them in the VStack, and that's it. That's all I need. So this cleans up my code quite a bit. And so you can also put views within views within views, as many layers as you can tolerate. And so here I've shown you how to put everything in a vertical stack, and then inside that vertical stack you have multiple horizontal stacks, which is an H stack, as you can see in the second layer of the code. And so you can put an H stack, multiple H stacks in fact, inside of a V stack, and you don't have to only put stacks within stacks. You can put just regular views in stacks. So here you have a horizontal stack, a piece of text, and another horizontal stack, all within a VStack. Another thing to note is that when you initialize the VStack, you can set properties for its alignment. Here it's center aligned, and then you can also add vertical spacing in between the views. But spacing, you have to be careful with it, because if you want different amounts of spacing between your different vertically aligned objects, you may want to use spacers instead, which I'll show you here. So a spacer is kind of very flexible. By default, if you just initialize the spacer, it will push the views away as far as it can in the opposite direction of where the spacer is. But you can also just like say spacer.frame height is 10, and then it'll give you a 10 tall spacer. But here, as you can see, I can move my face real quick, or you can see that, right? So I have basically a spacer here, and then spacers in between the pieces of text as well that push them away from each other as far as they can, but still not off the screen. Does that make sense? Cool. So another way to compose views is if you want to put one view like smack on top of another view, you can use a Z-stack. And this is just like a stack on the Z-axis, which comes out of your screen. And so here I put a bunch of circles and a line on top of another circle. And so within the Z-stack, you can see that I have the first line is a circle with the frame. And this is the bottommost layer. So it's kind of unintuitive to have like what's at the top of the code actually be at the bottom of the stack. But you just kind of have to get used to that. And again, I have a VStack, which composes the two sets of circles on top of the line, and then an H stack, which puts the two circles next to each other. So does everybody kind of understand what's going on here with like the spacing, the frames, and stacks and stuff? Cool. As I said, it's pretty straightforward, pretty easy. So let's actually test whether it's easy and straightforward. I have an exercise for you guys. How would you compose this Spotify screenshot? And feel free to just speak up or raise your hand if you're more comfortable with that. You got something?
Maybe H stacks the function from this way, and then V stacks the ones from.
Right. And what about the little like floating player control bar thing at the bottom, like this thing? Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah, that's about it. So in a second, I'm going to talk about reusing views. And so instead of maybe putting a bunch of horizontal stacks within VStacks here, you may want to use a list or a for each, but I'll talk about that later. We cool? All right. So reusing views. How do we make lists? How do we make grids like the one on the previous screen? And how do we make rows and cards, right? So I can't move my face. All right. So this piece of code on the left is everything I need to write to create this little row design here. And I just want to mention that this may look like 30 lines of code. It looks a lot on a screen, but actually it's a lot fewer lines of code than if you had to implement like a saved song cell.swift file, right? You would have to implement the initializer. You would have to implement the identifier, register the name of the cell in the table view delegate, and all of that bullshit, right? Here, we're not going to do any of that. We're just going to say, this is what the view looks like, right? We declare it. And so we actually have a song variable, which will initialize the song row with like the song data. And then we have an image that takes the song's image name from the assets folder and then populate it with two pieces of text composed in a VStack, so the title and the artist names. And don't worry too much about like the logic that I'm doing with the artist names. It's just a little bit of string manipulation, which you can look at later, but that's not the point of this lecture. And also notice that I have a spacer at the rightmost of the H stack, and that's just like pushing everything to the left. Cool? All right, so I can use save song rows struct in another view. So our content view is like basically the main screen. And then I've created one instance of saved song row. And you might be wondering, like, where did song data come in? I have it hard-coded in the demo code if you want to check out right now. But I'll show you how to download the demo code when I start the demo as well. So you can follow along at that point. But as you can see, let song just tells us that like when you initialize save song row, it's looking for a song as an initializing parameter. And so it's going to require the song to be entered once you call the constructor. We cool? So it's like a implicit initializer. That's what it's called. So here I can obviously have one of them. And if I want to have multiple of them, instead of typing save song row like 10 times, I can use a for each constructor. So everybody here kind of knows what a for each loop is, right? You iterate over every element of a list of things, and then you can do something to everything. Or you can do the same thing to every single element of a list. That's what the for each enables you to do. So I for each over the songs data, and there's 10 songs that I have stored in the code. And then I identify each of them by self, right? So this is just kind of to help me like query into the data of the song. That's what the ID field is for, right? So this just says like whatever this is going to be each song's self. And songs has, each song has a title, it has an image name, it has artist names, and I can query those here too to bring into this variable. But I'm not going to do that because I want to pass the entire song, so I just say self. And so I pass every single song into a save song row, and it'll make every single song into a save song row. So I hope you guys like my music taste. Cool. Any questions about the for each VStack thing? Yeah.
I'm just sorry about for each loop, but is HStack or for VStack and HStack, does an HStack generally go inside a VStack or the other way around?
So it depends on kind of what your overall layout is going to be. If everything is like on a macroscopic scale, like scrolling downwards, you want to put them in a VStack. And then if you have like things that scroll sideways but mostly scroll vertical, then you want to include the HStacks in your VStack. It seems natural because your phone is like vertical and longer. So most of the time you will be putting an HStack in a VStack, but you don't have to, right? You can put a VStack in an HStack like I have in this example, because like the object itself is mostly composed in a horizontal way. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. All right, navigation, moving from one screen to another. So the first thing you want to do to enable navigation is to actually wrap your primary screen within a navigation view. This allows you to kind of automatically generate the navigation bar that appears on top, and all of the navigation logic is kind of done for you. So as long as you wrap it in a navigation view, you are capable of navigating from one screen to another. And the navigation view takes in a modifier for the style that it navigates. And here I put the stack style, and this is just kind of what you're used to for like pushing view controllers on top of another. You think of it as a stack, so like you have your first screen and your second screen. When you, go to the second screen, you like add it onto the stack, right, from the right side. And so I have a little animation for that in a second as well. But another thing to notice is I added a modifier called navigation bar hidden is true to saved songs view. Saved songs view is going to be like our view that we're going to be working on in a second. But I want to hide the navigation bar because in the designs there's actually no like back button, there's no bar on top, right? I just have the heading and everything I designed on my own. So I have that hidden. And then once you set it up with the navigation view, you want to have whatever thing you tap to navigate to a different screen, you want to wrap that in a navigation link, right? So in our case, when I tap on like this song, for example, I want to go to another page where I look at the lyrics for the song. So I want to wrap this row in a navigation link. And then I also want to specify where that navigation links to, right? So navigation link here has two parameters. The first one is its destination. So the destination is going to be the song lyrics view. And then the label is just what it looks like, again, is the save songs row, right? And navigation link itself does not have like something it looks like. It doesn't have borders. It doesn't have like substantive UI presence. That's why it requires a label to populate what it actually looks like. So any questions about the navigation link? Cool. I guess something I haven't explained yet is every single row has its own navigation link because it's produced out of a for each, right? So we create 10 navigation links with rows, one row in each navigation link. So each row will take in a song, or yeah, it'll pass in a song into its respective destination song lyrics view. So when I tap on a row, this is what happens, right? Or I guess if I tap on the first row, that's what happens. Cool. So now I'm going to move on into the demo. Before I do that, does anybody have questions about any of the previous slides? So we talked about what is SwiftUI, why do we want to use SwiftUI, how to make views, how to combine views, and how to reuse views and navigate. Okay, you'll probably have more questions during the demo, but before that, Justin, I'm gonna need your iPad password.
Oh.
Yeah.
And also, the demo code has been uploaded to the textbook already. So if you go to the guest lecture section and you scroll down, there will be a.
Yeah, I'm using that.
There will be a part that links you to this GitHub, which has this code. Let me know if you have any issues downloading the code. If you want like a zip file or something, I can just airdrop it to you or something.
It's under the additional topics section, and also if you want the completed code, it's actually under a different branch.
Yeah, so last week, or I guess a little while ago, you guys had a GitHub lecture. Hopefully you remember how to use it, or at least have Git installed. This will help you get to the different versions of the demo code. But I'll just walk through that for you right now. So this repository is linked in the textbook. Once you get here, you can click on the code button and copy the Git link using the HTTPS option. And then you would go into your terminal, not your reminders, go into your terminal, and I'm going to CD into my desktop. So I'm on my desktop, and the next thing I do in order to get this code actually on my computer is to type git clone, and then I paste the URL of the repository. Click. Oh yeah, sorry. Can everybody see that? Yeah, cool. So I typed git clone, and then I pasted the repository URL, and I clicked enter. And so now on my desktop, you should see this repository, and notice how there's nothing in it, right? That was intentional to make sure that you also know how to use git to navigate between branches. And so to get to lecture 1 starter code, you would type, first go into the repository, so cd into the name of the directory, and then type git checkout, and then the name of the branch, right? So the name of the branch here is called L1-starter. I'm going to check out that branch, and then another neat trick is to type xed space period, and this will open the project in Xcode. So now I have the project open in Xcode. So has anybody gotten stuck on any of those steps? I typed git space checkout, and then the name of the branch, which is L1-starter. Good? Cool. Oh, at the end I typed xed period. Cool. So before I dive into the actual demo using the starter code, I'm actually going to create a new SwiftUI project for you guys, just to show you how you can do that. So open up Xcode and click on Create a New Xcode Project. Make sure you're on the iOS tab here because we're creating an iOS app. Click on App, and then call the product whatever you want. I'm just going to say Demo. And then make sure you set the interface to SwiftUI. Okay, this is the most important part because it will make all the default files have SwiftUI views in them. And I'll just click Next, and I'll choose a directory for it. So just make it at the desktop for now. And then make this a little bigger. As you can see, this is what you will see in every single SwiftUI view, right? On the left side, you had your code, and then on the right side, you have the canvas slash live preview. And I'm going to try to click this and get it to work, but I've never gotten it to work on my computer because actually I have no clue why it doesn't work. But this preview provider is what controls what data gets shown on the preview. And in order for this preview to stop showing up, I just delete this. I just delete it. I mean, the code base I work on for app dev also never uses previews, so it's okay to keep them commented out or deleted. But yeah, so now we have a brand new project open, and we have 2 files, right? Or I guess 3. Assets is the same as in UIKit. So this is a file called demo app. It'll just take the product name or the name of your app and then append app to it. And this is basically your main file, right? It composes the window, and you insert the content view into the window. I like to think of content view as your main view controller. It controls the very base level of everything. So that's where you want to set up your navigation. I'll just enter content view here. This is where I want to set up the navigation and any tab views or anything like that that kind of provide a control over where the screens show up and all the logic for that. This is also where I would put global variables or anything like that if I need to. So that's how you create a brand new SwiftUI project. Any questions on that? Cool. I am not going to save that. Now I'm going to open up the starter code from what I've just downloaded. And let's first check out what's in the starter code, right? This is a little different than the demo project, the brand new one that I just created, because I've already given you all the files that you need and some to-dos. So let's first look at the 2 files that are complete. Okay, you don't need to modify these files. The first one is the song file. This just provides a data type for storing the song information. So it has an album name, artist names, image name, lyrics, title, so on and so forth. And then I made an extension here that just has all the hard-coded songs that you saw in the playlist earlier. Don't have to worry about this. You can look at it if you want, but don't spend too much time on that. And then song lyrics view is another lyrics view that I showed you earlier that I've already completed, but I'll explain this at the very end because it involves a little more complex use of SwiftUI. But for the demo, we're going to focus on content view, which has nothing in it so far, saved song row, which shows us how to create a cell class, and also saved songs view. Okay. So the first thing that we're going to do is just run the code and see what we have. I'm pretty sure we have nothing. Yeah, looks like nothing to me. So, okay, we have hello world, right? And let's see which view is actually being shown right now. So we go to our main file, which is annotated with @main, and it's showing the content view, right? So let's go to content view, and it's showing the hello world text. And so the first thing that we want to do in content view, because it's kind of the primary view, we want to set up our navigation, right? Well, actually, I'm not going to set up the navigation yet. That comes a little later when we're actually getting to tapping the different rows. So the first thing I'm going to do is link it to saved songs view. Okay, so when I link it to saved songs view, it's going to populate the screen with whatever's in this file, right? So this is just 2 steps. The first step is basically doing nothing, but we'll modify that step later to make it handle navigation. So our new actual first step is to kind of create saved songs view according to the designs. So I'm going to go back to the slides and actually look at the design for our app. So the first thing is we want to kind of create a heading, right? We're going to call it lyricist, save songs, and there's a rectangle here. So let's see. All right. So can anybody tell me kind of what the overall structure of this view is? Like which HStacks and VStacks are we using? Yeah, okay, I heard your whisper. It is just a big VStack. So we have a heading on top, and then we have the kind of divider thing with the save songs text, and that's actually an HStack of a piece of text and a rectangle. And then below that is a scroll view, and I'll talk about what a scroll view is in a second. It just lets you scroll, but inside of the scroll view is another VStack of just all the songs. So let's first make the heading. I'm going to say this, let's see. Yeah, or I'm going to call it title. And the text is just all caps, lyricist. I'm going to make it a large font title and make the foreground color yellow. Cool. And so I'm going to wrap all of that in the VStack. Let's see. Yeah. And so I'm actually going to align this VStack in the center just because that's kind of the precedent, and also the title is supposed to be in the center. And I'm going to force the spacing to be 0. I want my own different spacing between every view. So the default spacing is going to be 0. I'm just going to put the title here. Cool. So I'm going to run it again just to see what I get. And yeah, we have a title here, right? Because it's the only element in the VStack, it's just going to appear in the middle. So our next item is to kind of have the subtitle here. So I'm going to create a new subtitle variable and compose it in an HStack. Cool, saved songs. And the text is, or the font is subheadline. And the foreground color is white. And because the white foreground color is not gonna show up on this white background, I'm actually gonna go back and set the preferred color scheme to dark mode. And that's just gonna make everything dark mode, including the background, and it's gonna change that into black. Noah's celebrating right now. So let's see what that looks like now. Looks a lot more bold. And let's go back to making the subtitle. So we have an H stack right now, and we also said we'd put a rectangle here. And this foreground color will be white, and the frame will be, I have some constants written down. Width is 230, and the height is 2. So a line is just a really thin rectangle, is basically what I'm saying here. And then let's add that subtitle into the VStack. Cool. Looks okay. You know, we could use some spacing kind of vibes. So let's see. I'm going to put some vertical padding between the subtitle, or on either side of the subtitle. I'm going to make that 10. Okay, so padding is just like spacing on the outside of a view. Cool. The next thing we want to do is have the scroll view, right? So I'm going to create the scroll list, songs list, and this is going to be the scroll view. Now the scroll view has a couple of initializers. The axis is going to be vertical. Show indicators is going to be true. This indicator is just like the scroll indicator on the right side that shows that you're scrolling up and down. And then the content takes in this completion. I'm just going to double click it so that I can put content within it. And the content in it is just going to be a VStack. So we have the VStack, and in this case, I'm going to set the alignment of the VStack to be leading. One thing I forgot to mention earlier is that in VStacks, the alignment is going to give you options for leading, centered, or trailing, because everything is vertical, right? And so you have to figure out, or what's not defined yet is if everything stacked in a vertical way is going to be on the left side, on the right side, or just kind of centered. For H stacks, it's going to be aligned either horizontally centered, top, or bottom. Does that make sense? And then for Z stacks, because you're kind of coming out of the Z axis, it gives you a lot more options like bottom trailing, top leading, bottom leading, center, something like that. So just once you get to Z stacks and you want to mess around with the alignment, feel free to just play around with it with all the options. Cool. So we have leading alignment for these rows. Justin, can you type in your password again?
Yes. I was about to just yell it, but then it'll be in the recording, so.
Yeah, okay. So the next thing we're going to do is create a for each initializer. Just going to click the first one. And the data is going to be songs. Let me check just to make sure.
Do you want me to turn off sleeping?
No, it's fine. I'll just keep tapping it. So yeah, once again, I'm going to do the ID parameter, which is going to be self. And then song is going to be the song in the for each. And I'm going to put it in a saved song row with and pass the song in. Okay. So now I've created kind of a scrolling action type of thing, and I've added the saved song row. Now I want to add the scroll view to the main VStack, right? So I'm going to say songs list here. When I run it again, I'm not going to see anything because saved songs row just has hello world in it, right? If we go to the saved songs row file, it just has hello world. So our next step is to actually make this look like something, or make it actually show the song's information. So Okay, before I start this file, does anybody have any questions about what we did so far within saved songs view? Everything's pretty straightforward so far, right? Cool. So now we're gonna create the saved songs row. I think this was already in the lecture, so I'm just gonna type it out real fast. And if you have any questions, definitely stop me. I'm just gonna go into type racer mode now. I would fail type racer right now. Oh, this is embarrassing. Scale to fill. So something I'm going to do here actually is add a modifier to the VStack. And it's just going to be the foreground color modifier. But when I apply this to the VStack, it's going to actually apply it to every element in the VStack because the VStack itself does not look like anything, right? So it's going to propagate the foreground color modifier to both of these text things. I'm going to make it white. And then I'm going to add a spacer on the right side once again to push everything towards the left of the H stack, and then add some horizontal padding. Cool. And another thing to notice is that throughout all of this coding, I didn't deal with any auto layout or constraints. All of the spacing is calculated automatically, and that is what saves a lot of time because in UIKit, if you want to lay out something anywhere in the view, you have to add 4 constraints, which is 4 lines for every single view. And then if you want to do animations or change the position of something later on, you have to write another 4 lines to calculate that logic as well. But here, you can kind of just say, this is approximately where it's going to be, and it'll calculate that for you. Cool. So now I have this saved song row created. It should look a lot better. Very nice, right? Very nice. Cool. So we've already set up the saved songs row. So then we can go back to saved songs view and kind of think about what the next step is, right? We're also missing this other screen. This is already coded out for us, but we want to be able to navigate to it, right? So does anybody have a clue on what the very next line of code I'm going to write is going to be? You guys got an answer? Navigation view, that's right. So we're going to backtrack to our content view and set up our navigation. So I'm just going to say navigation view here and move this into the navigation view. And I'm going to specify that the style is stack. And once again, I want to hide the bar. So I'm going to get the bar modifier and set it to true. So this is going to be hidden. Let me check just to make sure. Yeah. Okay, cool. And so this enables navigation, but it doesn't actually like produce any navigating logic yet. So the next line of code that I'm going to write is a navigation link, right? I want to wrap these rows in a navigation link. And the first parameter is the destination. So actually, how about I show you the constructor. There's a bunch of different ways to implement a navigation link, but I choose the simplest way, which is just a destination and a label. So the destination is going to be saved song, or actually song lyrics view. And I'm going to pass the song in, and once again, I'm going to move this into the label of the navigation link. Oops, press B instead of B. Okay, now run it again, and now I can I can scroll with the scroll view, and I can click into this, and it'll show the lyrics, which is very cool. We didn't have to say, we didn't have to like bind song lyrics view into like a view controller that you keep persistently in your main view controller class, and say like navigation view question mark dot push whatever, right? We just say, let's link the navigation to this view, populate it with the correct information, and go there when we tap on it. And that's super straightforward. There's not very many steps involved, and it's very difficult to get lost in all of the delegate functions and the optional chaining and all of that stuff, right? So that's basically the end of our demo. Obviously, when you actually write this code yourself and think about how to compose the views, there's a lot more brain power involved. I had all of this kind of copied from the GitHub complete code, but definitely give it a shot in the next assignment, implementing it using a SwiftUI project. And then the last thing I'm going to talk about before we end the lecture, besides, I guess, any announcements that Noah and Justin have, is explaining song lyrics view. Okay, so this is kind of peak like SwiftUI usage. So the first thing is I take the environment variable, right? This is a decision that I made to bring in the presentation mode, which is kind of just like how the current view has been presented. And I mark it as an environment variable because I'm pulling it from like a global state. And each view has its own presentation mode. I just pulled this one from the environment. I'm going to use it later to dismiss the view, right? As you can see here, this is not a traditionally looking back button. I can use the default back button, but I didn't want to because I'm ambitious. So I built my own back button, and I have to kind of finagle my way into giving it functionality using this line of code. So here, once again, we have the implicit constructor by saying, okay, this is just going to be the song that the song lyrics view takes in. We have some header text, which is a VStack of these three elements of text. So this is the title, this is the name of the album, and these are the artists. And so I've composed that here. This is pretty straightforward stuff. And it looks kind of similar to the saved song row. And then the header itself uses a bit of geometry calculations in order to show this like image stretching behavior, right? This image stretching behavior is based off of the position of the scroll view, which, I do a little bit of addition and subtraction here and there to figure out like how much I want to scale this image depending on how far above the margin I've scrolled. So that's the calculation here. And the thing I want to emphasize is geometry reader. This is another one of those views that doesn't actually look like anything, but it provides you a geometry object that you can use to get information about your screen, right? So like you can say geometry.frame, and it will show you the scroll view's frame in relation to the entire UI screen. And then you can get more information from that by getting like the minimum Y value. And then from there, you can kind of infer using math where we are in the scrolling coordinate plane. So you can do more research into this. I'm not going to explain all of the math, but the header is essentially a composition of two Z stacks. So the first Z stack is just showing like the image at the bottom. And so there's an image at the bottom. I made it resizable, and then there's a linear gradient on top of it, right? You can kind of notice how like it's darker at the bottom of the image than it is at the top. And so that's because I applied a linear gradient to it. And this is very easy to create in SwiftUI. You specify the colors that you want in the gradient. So here I just have clear black, and then I have opaque black. And then the start point is at the top and the end point is at the bottom. And then because I specified that it's a linear gradient, it's gonna change those color values in a linear manner, from clear black to opaque black. And so The reason this is in a Z-stack is because I want the linear gradient to be see-through on top of the image. And then I apply these modifiers to the whole Z-stack, which will apply the same modifiers to both the image and the linear gradient. And so scale to fill is pretty natural. It just means that the image will maintain its aspect ratio as long as it's filling the entire container that it's given. And then the frame depends on the calculations that I did before. Clip just means that if I put something on top of it, it will not show up on top of, or it will behave as if it were behind something and covered. And then the offset also depends on the scrolling calculation that I did. And then header text, of course, is in front of both of these elements. So it's like on the outer end of the Z stack. And I show it on top of the image and the gradient. Everything else is pretty simple. I just made a scroll view with a bunch of text. So that's what this lyrics view is. I wanted to change the background, so I actually used a Z stack to put a rectangle behind everything, and I put the text on top of it. This is one way to put a background. There's like a newer way, I think, that I haven't learned yet, but this also makes sense. One thing to notice here is that I set the frame's maximum width and maximum height to infinity, just to force it to take up as much space as it can. Otherwise, it doesn't really work as a background because it only takes up as much space as the text itself that is in the Z stack. So finally, the body is simply a scroll view that contains a V stack of the header and the lyrics view. And then these modifiers, the first one just hides the navigation bar. Actually, the navigation bar shows when I scroll down. I haven't figured out why it does that, but it's actually kind of nice. And then the toolbar is, this creates this toolbar item on the top left, which is my custom beautiful back button. I set the placement for navigation bar leading, and then I just added a button, right? When I click the button, I use the presentation mode to dismiss the screen, as it does here. And then the label just looks like a left side chevron. And again, I use a default image here to make it look like that. The last thing is I set the edges ignoring safe area to all, because I want the image to kind of show above the notch, right? If I remove this, it will black out the notch so that we can see the time with no background, and I don't really like that. So I let it ignore the safe area. And that's our song lyrics view, and that's also the end of our lecture. Does anybody have questions about song lyrics view or SwiftUI in general? Yeah.
How does passive information work then? Is it the same way as regular before?
It is very different, and I'm going to talk about that next lecture. Yeah, next lecture is entirely dedicated to that. Anything else? Cool. All right. Thank you, guys.
Before people leave, Hack Challenge, your final project, is starting up. We'll be sending out a form tonight that will be due Friday night, and it will ask you just, it's a team matching form.
You got it.
All right. So Hack Challenge is ramping up, so it's our final project. And it's a team project. You're going to be working with students from the other courses. And if you're in another course, you can choose which role you want. But so we're going to put this form out for team matching. If you have friends you would like to work with, you can put them down. If you don't, we will have a mixer on Friday, which we will send you more information about. Or you can just get matched through our system, which is going to be about availabilities. It's up to you guys. But so this form tonight is just going to be asking you for your availabilities, your preferred, or which courses you're taking. And it's also going to ask you to start thinking about a project idea. So once you get with your group, you can maybe have an idea that you guys will like to do. But we'll be sending out more specific information about it. But for now, tonight we are sending out the form. It's due Friday. We have a mixer on Friday, and we will have a a Hack Challenge kickoff presentation during this class on Monday. So please be here if you can. Other than that, you'll be getting a lot more information about it soon. Yeah.
Yay. Hack challenge is fun. Use SwiftUI.
Oh yeah, SwiftUI is an option.